Welcome dear students. Our current session is on the features of South Asian English. I hope and expect by the end of this session you would have an understanding of the main features of South Asian variety of English. Well, my dear students, I hope you know English was introduced to South Asian countries in the early 17th century, and it was reinforced by the long rule of the British Empire in the subcontinent. As far as the current situation is concerned, today it is spoken by 33 million people. That makes 3% of the total population. Well, when we think of 3%, it might seem a comparatively smaller number, but when you look at it from the perspective of a far bigger population in total, this 3% makes quite significant number of people. Today, the varieties of South Asian English are divided according to the modern states. Today, when we actually use the term South Asian English, it refers to various, I would say, sub-varieties of English, for example, Indian English or Pakistani English, etc. So here are the varieties: Bangladeshi English, Indian English, Nepali English, Pakistani English, and Sri Lankan English. Although it is fairly homogeneous across the region, it's very difficult to distinguish between, for example, Bangladeshi English and Pakistani English, or between Pakistani English and Indian English, or for that matter, Sri Lankan English and Nepali English. The varieties, though there are slight internal differences, but in general, all this makes one variety of language. As far as Indian English is concerned, it has words of Indian vernaculars that have been made a part of English language through the times, because when the British rulers came to the subcontinent, living in the subcontinent and using English language as a medium, yet experiencing a different culture, a culture that is completely different from what they had experienced in the Great Britain, they needed words from the local languages, which were gradually, brought into English language. Here I would give you some examples of that. Look at the words, for instance: jungle, tank, Bangalore, and veranda. It is very interesting that with the passage of time, these words have become a part of standard English. And if you look at any of the standard dictionaries of English, in fact, you would find all of these words there. There are many socio-political, sociological, and administrative terms that are derived from the local varieties of languages and that have become a part of Indian English. Here on the screen, you can see certain examples that are given in red color. For example, dharna. It is very interesting that in all the standard English dictionaries now you would find this word. Hartal, eve-teasing, vote bank, swadeshi, tiffin. Tiffin has become a standard word now, though this is an Indian variety for lunchbox. Hill station and gymkhana. These are all the words that come from the Indian variety. And it's very interesting that the Indian variety of English and Pakistani variety of English they're almost, the same because they share the culture. So the words that are taken, into English from this background, they are the same. So I hope you would be able to notice the resemblance between the Indian and the Pakistani varieties of English. I would give you some interesting examples of how the Indian and Pakistani varieties of English differ from the standard variety of English as well. For example, on the screen, notice this word, upgradation. For example, our company lays great stress on technical training and knowledge upgradation. Now, this use of upgradation is quite, particular to this region. It is not used this way outside this region. This is an example of Indian, English. The Prime Minister greeted the press persons with a namaskar. and a broad smile. Namaskar is a purely, Indian word that comes from the local vernaculars, but it has become a part of standard English in a way that it is frequently used in Indian English. A very interesting example that we frequently find in both Indian and Pakistani varieties of English is of the word matrimonials. It is interesting that matrimonials is not used this way in British or American English. In fact, it is not used with this S. But in Pakistani and in the Pakistani and Indian varieties, we find, I read the newspaper matrimonials on Sunday. This again is an example of the variety that is used here in this region, especially the English knowing intelligentsia. English knowing, this use of knowing, we do not find it in standard English, neither in the British nor in the general American. As far as spelling and pronunciation is concerned, again, there are certain differences in South Asian English when we compare it with other varieties of English outside this region. Most Indian languages, unlike English language, they have, a nearly phonetic, spelling system. The sound tells what would be the spelling. This is how it happens in most of the Indian languages and also in Pakistani languages. The result is, that Indians and Pakistani speakers, when they speak in English, they try to pronounce words focusing on the spelling. They think spellings are a guide to, pronunciation. I would give you a very common example. Notice the word on the screen, jewelry. It is pronounced as jewelry. And the word jewel is pronounced as jewel. Now let me compare this Pakistani pronunciation, jewelry and jewel, with the standard British pronunciation. If you notice that most of the times this part is omitted. This part is omitted when it would be pronounced in the West, and it would be pronounced as jewelry. Jewelry, no. EU, no. Jewelry. Jewelry. So, jewel. Instead of pronouncing it as jewel, as we pronounce it, the English speakers would pronounce it as jewel. Jewel. Jewelry. Jewel. We pronounce it as jewelry. Jewel. The word off is another example. Well, in the standard British English accent, this F of off is not to be pronounced as f. It is to be pronounced as v. So a British speaker would pronounce it as of, but we pronounced it as off. This makes difference in the pronunciation of this word. Another interesting example is of the word house. I would say this doesn't happen much in Pakistani variety. This happens more in the Indian variety somehow, where house, that is a noun, and house, that is a verb. Both of these in the Indian variety, they are pronounced as house with z sound instead of s sound. Here are some examples that are particular to Pakistani English. For example, the term in charge. We are so very used to this term. We very frequently use this term in our casual, informal conversations. However, in charge, try to find it in the dictionary, any standard English dictionary, you would not find the word because this is otherwise not a part of standard English. Another expression that is used is same to same, which refers to indicate something that is exactly same as something else. This expression, same to same, is not standard British or American English. Out of station, again, we think this is a very, correct expression according to the British or American English. No, it is not. Out of station for us means out of town. However, it is not American or British English. An interesting expression is got no lift. When somebody does not pay attention to us, we say that person did not give us lift, or we did not get lift, whereas this expression does not exist in the British or the American varieties of English. Another interesting example is of the mode of address miss. Miss is used to address or refer to female teachers irrespective of the marital status. So a female teacher, whether married or not, would still be called Miss. In the same way, the mode of address, madam, is used to address and to refer to females in positions of authority, and usually, when somebody is in a superior position, they would be addressed in formal situations as madam. Cousin brother, again, this is used also in Indian variety as well, where male first cousin or cousin sister, female first cousin are referred to as cousin brother and cousin sister respectively. Another very interesting example is of overhead bridge. Overhead bridge actually is meant to refer to the bridge that is for the pedestrians, people who would, walk over to cross the road, who would use this overhead bridge. Compare it with the example of flyover. Flyover refers to overpass or an overbridge actually that is used for cars to, when there is one road and another road is made that would allow the cars to, move on that and to reach the other end. This is used as, the term is used as a flyover. This distinction is found only in the local varieties of English in the South Asian part of the world.